My parents funded my sister's dream life in London. They paid for everything: her apartment, her lifestyle, her adventures. Meanwhile, they told me I deserved nothing. For years, I watched them pour money into her life while I struggled alone. Every time I asked for help, they had the same answer: your sister needs it more. I worked 2 jobs, scraped by, and built my life from nothing while she posted photos of luxury restaurants and weekend trips. Then one day, everything changed. My parents showed up at my door, desperate, begging for help. Their perfect daughter had cut them off, and suddenly they remembered I existed. They needed money, a lot of it. They expected me to drop everything and rescue them just like that. But they had no idea what I'd built while they ignored me. They didn't know about the success I'd achieved on my own. When I opened my mouth to respond, the look on their faces told me they finally understood. You can't ignore someone for years and then demand their help. Sometimes, the child you overlook becomes the one you need most. And by then, it's too late. I still remember the exact moment my parents told me I wasn't worth investing in. I was 23 years old, sitting at their kitchen table, holding an acceptance letter to a prestigious graduate program. My hands were shaking with excitement as I showed them the letter. This was my dream, my chance to build the career I'd always wanted. The program was competitive, selective, and expensive. I'd worked so hard to get in. My mother barely glanced at the letter before sliding it back across the table. My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. "We can't afford it," my mother said flatly. "You'll have to figure something else out." I felt my stomach drop. "But I thought we could talk about it. Maybe I could take out loans, and you could help with part of it? I'd pay you back, I promise." My father finally lowered his newspaper and looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. Cold, dismissive, like I was asking for something absurd. "Your sister needs our support right now. She's building her life in London. That's where our money is going." "But she's been there for 2 years already," I said, my voice cracking. "You've paid for her apartment, her expenses, everything. Can't you help me too? Just this once?" My mother's face hardened. "Your sister is pursuing important opportunities. She's networking with influential people, building connections that will serve her entire life. You can get a job and work your way up like everyone else." "I have a job," I protested. "I've been working since I was 16. I've never asked you for anything." "Exactly," my father said, folding his newspaper with sharp, deliberate movements. "You're capable of taking care of yourself. Your sister needs us more. She's sensitive, she's navigating a foreign country, and she deserves our support." That word, deserves. It burned into my brain. My sister deserved their support, and I deserved nothing. I left their house that day with my acceptance letter and a crushing weight in my chest. I declined the graduate program. I couldn't afford it on my own, not with the debt I'd already accumulated from undergraduate studies. Instead, I threw myself into work. I took on a second job, working days at a marketing firm and evenings at a restaurant. I barely slept. My apartment was tiny. My furniture was secondhand. And I lived on pasta and whatever leftovers I could bring home from the restaurant. Meanwhile, my sister's Instagram told a different story. Designer clothes, trendy restaurants, weekend trips to Paris, Barcelona, Amsterdam. Her life looked like a magazine spread, and every single bit of it was funded by our parents. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and comment what you would do in this situation. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the constant reminder that I didn't matter as much. Family dinners became torture sessions, where my parents would gush about my sister's latest adventures while barely asking about my life. "Oh, she just got invited to this exclusive gallery opening," my mother would say, scrolling through photos on her phone. "Look at her in that dress. Isn't she stunning?" "That's nice," I'd say quietly. "I got promoted at work this week." "That's good, dear." My mother would respond without looking up. "Now look at this photo of your sister at the Thames. Isn't London just magical?" My father would nod enthusiastically. "We're so proud of the life she's building there. It takes real courage to pursue your dreams in a foreign country." I wanted to scream. What about the courage it took to work 16-hour days? What about the dreams I'd sacrificed because they wouldn't help me? But I said nothing. I just felt my face burning with shame, wondering what I'd done wrong to deserve so little of their love. Would you do the same in my place? Years pass like this. I kept working, kept climbing, kept building my life brick by brick with no help from anyone. I learned to be resourceful. I networked obsessively, took every opportunity that came my way, and slowly built a reputation in my field. It was exhausting and lonely, but I had no choice. Nobody was going to rescue me. My sister, meanwhile, extended her London adventure indefinitely. 5 years turned into 7. 7 turned into 10. And my parents kept funding it all. I stopped asking how much they were spending. I didn't want to know. Every time I visited them, I'd see evidence of their sacrifices for her. They downsized to a smaller house. They drove old cars. They cut back on their own expenses. All so she could live her dream life abroad. Don't you think she should start supporting herself? I asked my mother once during a rare moment of honesty between us. She's 32 years old. When is she going to stand on her own feet? My mother's face turned to ice. Your sister is doing important work. She's building a career in the arts. It takes time to establish yourself in that world. Not everyone can just work a regular job like you. A regular job. That's what she called the career I'd built through sheer determination and countless sacrifices. A regular job. My hands trembled with contained rage, but I swallowed my anger. What was the point? They'd made their choice years ago. I was the sturdy one, the one who didn't need help. My sister was the special one, the delicate flower who needed constant watering and sunshine. Give it a thumbs up if you think I did the right thing. Then something shifted in my career. I'd been working on a major project for months, something that could potentially transform our company's market position. I'd poured everything into it, my expertise, my creativity, my connections. When we finally launched, it was a massive success. Industry publications wrote about it. Competitors tried to copy it. And my boss called me into her office with news that changed everything. "We want to promote you to Director of Innovation," she said, smiling widely. "And we're prepared to offer you a significant raise in equity in the company." I stared at her, barely able to process the words. Director. Equity. This was beyond anything I'd imagined. "There's one more thing," she continued. "We want you to lead our expansion into international markets. You'd have the autonomy to build your own team, set strategy, and shape the future of this company." I walked out of that office in a daze. After years of struggle, of being overlooked and underestimated, I was finally being recognized. Not because of my parents' money or connections, because of my own merit, my own hard work. I didn't tell my parents about the promotion. What was the point? They'd probably just find a way to make it about my sister anyway. I threw myself into my new role, working harder than ever. I hired talented people, launched innovative campaigns, and watched as our company's revenue grew exponentially. Within 2 years, my equity stake became worth serious money. Within 4 years, I was wealthy. Not comfortable, wealthy. I bought a beautiful house in a prestigious neighborhood. I invested wisely. I built a life that would have seemed impossible to that 23-year-old girl sitting at her parents' kitchen table, holding her dreams in her hands. And through it all, my parents knew nothing. I kept my distance, visiting rarely and sharing little about my life. It was easier that way, less painful. Leave me in the comments. Have you been through something similar? My sister, meanwhile, had finally returned from London. Her Instagram went quiet around the time she turned 38. No more glamorous photos. No more exotic locations. At their age, they should be enjoying retirement, not worrying about money. "That's unfortunate," I said carefully. I felt a cold fury settling over me, but I kept my voice neutral. "I thought you should know," my aunt continued. "Maybe you could help them. I know you have a good job." "I'll think about it," I said, and ended the call. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds before deciding to do nothing. They'd made their choices. They'd told me explicitly and repeatedly that I didn't deserve their help. Why should I rescue them from the consequences of their own decisions? But apparently, my aunt had told them she'd spoken to me, because 2 weeks later, my doorbell rang on a Sunday afternoon. I opened the door to find my parents standing there. I barely recognized them. They'd aged dramatically since I'd last seen them. My father looked thin and tired. My mother's face was lined with stress. They stood on my doorstep, staring at my house with expressions I couldn't quite read. "Can we come in?" my mother asked quietly. I stepped aside and let them enter. They walked through my home slowly, taking in the high ceilings, the expensive furniture, the original artwork on the walls. I watched their faces as reality set in. Their daughter, the one who deserved nothing, was living the kind of life they dreamed of. We sat in my living room, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. My mother kept looking around, her mouth slightly open. My father stared at his hands. Finally, my mother spoke. "You've done well for yourself." "Yes," I said simply. "I have." "We didn't know," she continued. "You never told us." "You never asked," I replied. My voice was calm, but my heart pounded so hard it hurt. "Do you think I overreacted?" My father cleared his throat. "We need to talk to you about something important. We're in a difficult financial situation. We spent our retirement savings supporting your sister, and now we're struggling. We have debt, medical bills. We might lose the house." I felt the floor opening beneath my feet, but not from shock, from the sheer audacity of what was coming next. My mother leaned forward, her eyes pleading. "We need your help. We know we haven't been there for you the way we should have been, but you're our daughter. Family helps family. We need you to help us get back on our feet." There it was. After decades of being told I didn't deserve their support, they wanted mine. I let the silence stretch out, watching them squirm. "How much do you need?" I asked finally. My father named a figure that made my mother wince. It was substantial. It would require me to liquidate investments, to sacrifice my own financial security. "That's a lot of money," I said slowly. "We know," my mother said quickly, "but you clearly have it. Look at this house. Look at your life. You can't afford to help us." A lump tightened in my throat, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from anger I'd been suppressing for decades. "Let me make sure I understand," I said, keeping my voice level. "You want me to give you money because I'm family, and family, and family. Is that right?" They both nodded eagerly. "That's interesting," I continued, "because when I was 23 and needed help with graduate school, you told me I deserved nothing. You said your money was going to my sister because she deserved your support more than I did. Do you remember that conversation? Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories like this." My mother's face went pale. That was different. "You were young. You had your whole life ahead of you. And now?" I asked. "Now I'm supposed to sacrifice my financial security because you made poor decisions? Because you chose to fund my sister's endless vacation in London instead of planning for your own future?" "It wasn't a vacation," my father protested weakly. "She was pursuing her dreams." "At what cost?" I stood up, my blood boiling with indignation. "At the cost of your retirement? Your security? And let me guess, where is she now? Why isn't she here asking for her help?" My parents exchanged a glance. My mother spoke quietly. "Your sister doesn't have any money. She never established a career. She's living with us and she's struggling too." "Of course she is," I said, "because you never taught her to struggle. You never made her stand on her own feet. You enabled her for decades while telling me I was capable of taking care of myself." "We made mistakes," my mother whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "We see that now. But please, we're desperate. We need your help." I looked at these two people who'd given birth to me, who'd raised me, and who'd spent decades making me feel like I wasn't enough. And I felt something I never expected to feel. Not anger, not satisfaction, just a deep, profound sadness. "You want to know something?" I said quietly. "When you told me I deserved nothing, I believed you. For years, I carried that belief like a weight on my chest. I worked myself to exhaustion trying to prove I was worth something. I built this life not because I believed in myself, but because I had no choice. Nobody was going to save me. My father looked up, his eyes red. We were wrong. We were so wrong. Please give us a chance to make it right. Make it right? I laughed bitterly. You can't make it right. You can't give me back my 20s when I was working 2 jobs while my sister was having adventures. You can't give me back the graduate degree I never got. You can't undo decades of feeling like I wasn't enough. Comment below what you would have done differently. My mother was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Please, we're your parents. We love you. Do you? I asked. Because love isn't just a word, it's actions. It's support. It's believing in someone and investing in their dreams. You showed me exactly how much you loved me every time you chose her over me. We're begging you, my father said, his voice breaking. We'll pay you back. We'll do anything. I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. You want to know the worst part? I could help you. I could write you a check right now that would solve all your problems. My financial advisor has been telling me I need to diversify my investments anyway. The money you're asking for? It wouldn't significantly impact my life. Hope flared in their eyes. I watched it happen and I felt sick. But I'm not going to do it, I said firmly. The hope died instantly, replaced by shock and disbelief. You're going to let us lose our house? My mother asked, her voice rising. You're going to let your own parents become homeless? No, I said. I'm going to let you experience the consequences of your own choices. Just like I had to experience the consequences of your choice to invest nothing in me. This is cruel, my father said, standing up. This is vindictive and cruel. Is it? I asked. Was it not cruel to tell your daughter she deserved nothing? Was it not cruel to fund one child's lifestyle for decades while ignoring the other? You taught me a valuable lesson. People need to stand on their own feet. You insisted I learn that lesson. Now it's your turn. Would you act differently in this situation? My mother grabbed my hand. Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We were terrible parents to you. We see that now. But please, don't punish us like this. I pulled my hand away gently. I'm not punishing you. I'm simply applying the same logic you applied to me. You're capable people. You can figure it out. Get jobs. Downsize. Make your other daughter contribute. You have options. You always had options. You just chose to take the easy path, and now that path has ended. We're too old to start over, my father said desperately. We're in our 70s, and I was 23, I replied, with no experience, no connections, and no support. At least you have a lifetime of experience to draw on. I stood up and walked to the door, opening it. I think you should leave now. They didn't move at first. They just sat there staring at me like they were seeing a stranger. Maybe they were. Maybe they'd never really seen me at all. Finally, my mother stood up, her legs shaky. You've become hard, she said. Success has made you hard. I felt my face burning with shame, but not for the reasons she thought. No, I said quietly. You made me hard. Every time you dismissed me, every time you told me I wasn't worth investing in, every time you chose her over me, you made me hard. This is what happens when you teach someone they can only rely on themselves. They believe you. My father stood up too, his face twisted with anger and desperation. We'll tell everyone what you've done. We'll tell the whole family you abandoned us. Go ahead, I said. Tell them. Tell them how you spent your entire retirement fund on one child while telling the other she deserved nothing. Tell them how you're shocked that the child you neglected won't bail you out now. I'm sure that will go over well. Give it a thumbs up if you think I did the right thing. They left without another word. I watched them walk down my driveway to their old car, both of them looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen them. Part of me wanted to call them back, to write that check, to fix everything, but I didn't. I closed the door and stood in my beautiful house, alone. The next few weeks were difficult. My phone rang constantly with calls from relatives. Some were angry. How can you let your parents suffer? My aunt demanded. They're family. Others were more understanding. I always wondered why they treated you so differently, my cousin said quietly. I'm sorry you went through that. My sister never called. Not once. I heard through the family grapevine that she was furious with me, that she'd called me selfish and heartless. The irony wasn't lost on me. Eventually, my parents figured something out. They sold their house and moved into a small apartment. My father got a part-time job at a hardware store. My mother started working at a local library. My sister finally got a job too, entry level, minimum wage, the kind of job most people start with in their 20s, not their 30s. They struggled. I heard about it through family members who seemed to think I'd change my mind if I knew how hard things were for them, but I didn't change my mind. I felt a cold, quiet satisfaction, knowing they were learning the same lessons they'd insisted I learn alone. 6 months after they showed up at my door, my mother sent me a letter. Not an email or a text. An actual letter, handwritten on lined paper. Dear daughter, it began. I noticed she used daughter instead of my name, just like I'd never mentioned my own name throughout this entire ordeal. Maybe she finally understood what it felt like to be reduced to a role instead of seen as a person. The letter was long. She talked about her regrets, about how she'd failed me, about how she understood now what she'd done. She wrote about watching my father work at the hardware store, about the humiliation of starting over in their 70s, about the reality of consequences. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for anything. She just said she was sorry. I read the letter 3 times and I cried. Not because I forgave them, not because I was ready to reconcile, but because I finally felt seen. After decades of being invisible, they finally saw me. I didn't respond to the letter. Not immediately. I needed time to process, to decide what I wanted from this situation. Did I want revenge? Did I want reconciliation? Did I want anything at all? Comment if you know someone like this. Meanwhile, I kept building my life. I started mentoring young professionals, especially young women who reminded me of myself hungry, talented, and overlooked. I funded scholarships for students who couldn't afford graduate school. I became the person I'd needed when I was 23. And slowly, I realized something. My parents' neglect had shaped me, but it didn't define me. I wasn't just the daughter who'd been told she deserved nothing. I was the woman who'd built something extraordinary despite that message. Their failure to invest in me had taught me to invest in myself, and that had made all the difference. 1 year after my parents showed up at my door, I drove to their apartment. It was in a modest neighborhood, nothing like the comfortable house they'd lived in before. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the building, trying to decide if I was ready for this. Finally, I got out and knocked on their door. My mother answered. She looked older, more tired, but there was something different in her eyes. Something that looked like wisdom earned through suffering. "Can I come in?" I asked. She stepped aside without a word. The apartment was small but clean. My father was sitting at a tiny kitchen table, reading a newspaper. He looked up when I entered, and I saw fear flash across his face. "I'm not here to give you money," I said immediately. "I want to make that clear." They both nodded, seeming to shrink into themselves. "But I'm here to talk," I continued, "because I've spent the last year thinking about what I want. And what I've realized is that I don't want revenge. I don't want to punish you forever. What I want is for you to understand what you did to me, really understand it." My mother sat down heavily. "We do understand. We've had plenty of time to think about it. Do you?" I asked. "Do you understand what it's like to feel invisible in your own family? To watch your parents pour love and money into your sibling while telling you that you're not worth the investment? Do you understand what that does to a person? Was I wrong to feel this way?" My father spoke up, his voice rough. "We understand now. Working at the hardware store, watching my coworkers who are half my age move forward while I'm stuck in a job I should have had 40 years ago, it's humbling, it's humiliating. And every day, I think about how we made you feel that way for years." "Why?" I asked. The question I'd been carrying for decades finally spilled out. Why did you choose her over me? What did I do wrong? My mother started crying. "Nothing. You did nothing wrong. You were always the strong one, the capable one. We thought you didn't need us. And your sister, she was always so fragile, so dependent. We worried about her constantly. So you sacrificed me to save her, I said. It wasn't a question. Yes, my mother whispered. And we were wrong. So terribly wrong. We enabled her instead of helping her grow. And we neglected you when you needed us most. We were bad parents to both of you, just in different ways. I sat down across from them, feeling the weight of decades of pain and anger settling between us. She's still not working, is she? Your precious daughter who needed so much support. My father shook his head. She's working now, part-time at a retail store. It's been hard for her. She's never had to support herself before. At 39 years old, I said. Most people learn that lesson in their 20s. We know, my mother said. We know we failed her too. We thought we were helping, but we were just making her weaker. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories like this. We sat in silence for a while. I looked around their small apartment, at the cheap furniture and bare walls. This was what happened when you poured everything into one basket, and that basket had a hole in it. I'm not going to give you money, I said again, but I'm going to do something. They looked up at me with a mixture of hope and fear. I'm going to help you learn how to budget and manage your money. I'm going to connect you with a financial advisor who works with people rebuilding after setbacks. And I'm going to be available to talk, to rebuild some kind of relationship, but on my terms, with boundaries, and with the understanding that I don't owe you anything. Whatever relationship we build going forward, it's a gift, not an obligation. My mother's tears flowed harder. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet, I said, because part of rebuilding means being honest. And I need you to be honest about why you really came to me that day. Was it because you finally saw me as your daughter? Or because I was the only one left who could save you? My father looked me in the eye. Honestly, it was because we were desperate. We came to you because we had no other options. But sitting here now, having lost everything we took for granted, I can tell you that we see you. Really see you. And I'm sorry it took losing everything for us to open our eyes. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was honest. And somehow, that honesty meant more than any pretty lie they could have told. Where's my sister today? I asked. Working, my mother said. She has a shift at the store. Does she know I'm here? They exchanged glances. No, my father admitted. She doesn't like when we talk about you. She thinks you're cruel for not helping us. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Course she does. She's never had to struggle, so she can't understand why I won't just fix everything for everyone. She's learning, my mother said softly, slowly, very slowly. Leave me in the comments. Have you been through something similar? I stood up to leave. I'll send you the financial advisor's contact information. Tell him I referred you. He'll help you figure out a plan, but you have to do the work. You have to make the changes. I'm not going to rescue you. We understand, my father said, standing up too, and we're grateful for this, for your willingness to even talk to us. I nodded and turned to go. At the door, I paused. One more thing. I need you to understand something. The person you see now, successful, confident, financially secure, this person exists because you told me I deserved nothing. I built this life out of necessity, out of a desperate need to prove I was worth something. So in a strange way, I should thank you. You taught me to rely only on myself, and that turned out to be the most valuable lesson of all. My mother's face crumpled. That's not a lesson any parent should teach their child. No, I agreed. It's not. But it's the lesson you taught me, and I survived it. I more than survived it. I thrived. So maybe the real lesson here is that you can't break someone who refuses to be broken. I left without looking back. As I drove away from their modest apartment building, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not exactly, but a kind of peace. I'd faced them, I'd told them my truth, and I'd set my boundaries. I didn't need their validation anymore. I didn't need their approval or their acknowledgement. I had built something they could never take away from me, my own sense of worth, Over the following months, I did help them in small ways. I connected them with resources. I taught them about budgeting and financial planning. I showed up for occasional dinners and tried to build something new with them. It wasn't the relationship other people had with their parents. It was careful, boundaried, and honest in ways that most families never achieve. My sister and I didn't reconcile. She sent me angry messages occasionally, accusing me of being heartless and selfish. I didn't respond. She was still living in the fantasy that someone else would always save her, and I had no interest in being her next enabler. One day, about 18 months after everything changed, I was having coffee with my mother when she said something that surprised me. You know what the hardest part is? It's not the small apartment or the tight budget or even the work. It's knowing that we did this to ourselves. We had 2 daughters, and we failed both of you. We just failed you in different ways. I stirred my coffee, considering her words. At least you finally see it. I do, she said, and I see you. I see what you've built, and I see the strength it took to build it. I see the woman you've become, and I'm proud of you. I know I don't have the right to be proud, but I am. Those words should have felt good. For years, I'd craved her approval, her recognition. But sitting there in that cheap coffee shop, I realized I didn't need it anymore. Her pride didn't change anything. It didn't erase the past or heal the wounds. It was just words. I don't need you to be proud of me, I said gently. I need you to understand that actions have consequences. You chose to invest everything in one daughter and nothing in the other. That choice shaped both of our lives. She never learned to stand on her own, and I never learned to lean on anyone. Those consequences will last forever, regardless of how you feel about them now. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and comment what you would do in this situation. My mother nodded slowly. You're right. We can't undo what we did. All we can do is try to be better now. Then be better, I said. Not for me. I don't need you to be better for me anymore. I'm fine on my own. Be better for yourselves. Learn to live within your means. Learn to support each other without enabling. Learn that love doesn't mean protecting someone from every consequence. She reached across the table and took my hand. I let her, though the gesture felt foreign and uncomfortable. Thank you for giving us a chance to learn these lessons, she said, even though we're learning them far too late. I squeezed her hand briefly before pulling away. You're welcome. But understand this, I'm not here to fix you or save you or make your life easy. I'm here because I decided I didn't want to carry anger for the rest of my life. But that doesn't mean everything is okay. It just means I'm choosing not to let your mistakes define me anymore. As I drove home that day, I thought about the journey I'd been on. From that 23-year-old girl holding an acceptance letter with shaking hands to the woman I'd become successful, independent, and finally at peace with who I was. The road had been hard, harder than it needed to be, but I'd walked it on my own terms, and that had made all the difference. I thought about all the times I'd felt invisible, all the times I'd wonder what was wrong with me, and I realized that nothing had been wrong with me. The failure wasn't mine, it was theirs. They'd had 2 daughters, and they'd chosen to see only one. But the daughter they hadn't seen had learned to see herself, and that had been the greatest gift of all. Sometimes the people who should love us most fail us in profound ways. Sometimes the ones who should lift us up push us down. And sometimes the greatest thing we can do is rise anyway, not because of their support, but in spite of their neglect. We proved that we never needed their approval to become who we were meant to be. Looking back now, I don't regret my decision to refuse them the money. Some people might call it cruel. Some might say I should have been the bigger person. But I know the truth. I was the bigger person. I was bigger than their narrow view of me. I was bigger than their favoritism and their excuses. I was bigger than their desperation and their sudden recognition of my worth. I built a life they never invested in. And when they came asking me to share that life with them, I chose to share my wisdom instead of my wealth. I taught them the lessons they'd taught me, that people must stand on their own, that nobody owes you rescue, that consequences are real and permanent. And in doing that, I finally freed myself from the weight of being the daughter who deserved nothing, because I know now that I deserved everything. I always did. They just couldn't see it. My phone buzzes sometimes with messages from family members who think I should do more for my parents. They don't understand, and I don't expect them to. You can't explain decades of accumulated pain in a text message. You can't make someone understand what it's like to be told, explicitly and implicitly, that you're not worth as much as your sibling. But I don't need them to understand. I understand. And that's enough. I still see my parents occasionally. We have a careful relationship built on honesty and boundaries. They know not to ask me for money. They know not to talk about the past unless I bring it up. They know that I'm in their lives by choice, not by obligation. My sister remains distant and angry. She posts occasional vague social media messages about family betrayal and people who forget where they came from. I don't engage. She's still waiting for someone to save her, and I'm done playing that role for anyone. Instead, I focus on building the life I want. I mentor young professionals who remind me of myself. I invest in people who've been overlooked and underestimated. I create opportunities for others that I never had. And in doing that, I finally feel like I'm using my success for something meaningful. Because that's the thing about being told you deserve nothing. It teaches you to value everything. Every opportunity, every success, every moment of recognition feels earned in a way it might not for people who had everything handed to them. I don't take anything for granted because I know how hard I fought for it all. Do you think I overreacted? Sometimes, late at night, I think about that 23-year-old version of myself sitting at my parents' kitchen table. I think about her dreams and her hope and her devastating disappointment. And I wish I could tell her what I know now, that their rejection wasn't the end of her story. It was Thaton Tar Novamente Zero Continuar Bigging, that she would build something so much bigger than she ever imagined, precisely because she had to do it alone. I wish I could tell her that the pain would transform into strength, that the invisibility would teach her to see herself clearly, that the neglect would forge an independence so complete that she'd never need anyone's approval again. But maybe she needed to walk that path without knowing the ending. Maybe the not knowing was what made her fight so hard. Today, I sit in my home office overlooking a garden I designed myself, and I feel something I never expected to feel: gratitude. Not for what my parents did to me, but for who I became in spite of it. They tried to teach me I was worth nothing, but I taught myself I was worth everything. And that's a lesson no one can ever take away from me. My parents call occasionally now, short conversations, updates about their lives. My father tells me about his coworkers at the hardware store. My mother talks about the books she's organizing at the library. They never complain. They never ask for more than I'm willing to give. And slowly, very slowly, we're building something new. Not a traditional parent-child relationship. Something more honest. Something based on mutual respect rather than obligation. I saw one of your interviews online, my father said during our last call. You were talking about mentorship and giving opportunities to overlooked talent. Oh? I said, surprised he'd been looking for information about me. You're good at it, he continued, at seeing people, really seeing them. I suppose you learned that from not being seen yourself? It was the most perceptive thing he'd ever said to me. I suppose I did. I'm sorry we didn't see you, he said quietly. I'm sorry every day. I know, I replied, and I did know. I could hear it in his voice, in the tiredness that came from working a job meant for someone decades younger, in the humility that came from losing everything. Comment below what you would have done differently. But knowing someone is sorry doesn't erase the past. It doesn't give back lost time or lost opportunities. It doesn't heal wounds that scarred over years ago. It just is what it is. An acknowledgement that comes too late to change anything, but perhaps early enough to build something small and careful in the ruins. My sister reached out last month. A short message. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time before responding. About what? About everything. About how things fell apart. About starting over. I thought about it, Part of me wanted to say no, to keep that boundary firmly in place, but another part of me wondered if maybe she'd finally learned something from her fall from grace. So I agreed to meet her for coffee. She looked different. Older, obviously, but also more grounded somehow, less polished. She was wearing regular clothes, not the designer brands she'd favored when our parents were funding her lifestyle. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked, for the first time in her life, like someone who worked for a living. We sat across from each other in awkward silence for a moment. Then she spoke. "I've been angry at you for a long time," she said. "I thought you were cruel for not helping Mom and Dad when they needed it. I thought you'd become hard and selfish." I said nothing, just waited. "But working retail for the past year and a half has given me a lot of time to think," she continued, "about how I've lived my life, about the choices I made, about how I never appreciated what I had, because I always thought it would be there." "And?" I prompted. She looked down at her coffee. "And I realize now that you were right. Mom and Dad did damage me, just in a different way than they damaged you. They made me weak. They taught me I didn't have to work for anything. They enabled me until I was nearly 40 years old and had no real skills, no career, no ability to take care of myself. Would you do the same in my place?" It was the most self-aware thing I'd ever heard her say. I felt something shift in my chest, some of the old resentment loosening its grip. "So why did you want to meet?" I asked. "To apologize," she said, looking up at me, "and to tell you that I understand now. I understand why you didn't help them, why you couldn't just fix everything with money. Because money is what ruined me. Money without work, without consequences, without having to prove I deserved it. Mom and Dad thought they were helping me, but they were destroying me. And now?" I asked. "Now I'm learning to be a person," she said with a sad smile. "At 39, I'm learning to pay bills and budget and show up on time and take orders from a manager who's 22 years old. I'm learning all the things I should have learned 20 years ago." I felt a lump tightening in my throat. Not from sadness exactly, from recognition. She was finally walking the path I'd walked alone for so long. "It's humbling," she continued, "being the oldest person in the break room, watching kids half my age get promoted past me because they have skills I never developed. Realizing I wasted decades of my life taking pretty pictures in London instead of building anything real." "London wasn't all waste," I said carefully. "You had experiences. You saw the world." "I saw the world through a lens of privilege I didn't earn," she corrected. "And I never appreciated any of it because I always thought there would be more. More money, more opportunities, more time. I thought I was special, that the rules didn't apply to me. Give it a thumbs up if you think I did the right thing." We sat in silence for a moment. I searched her face for signs of manipulation, for the entitlement I'd always seen there. But I saw only exhaustion and something that looked like genuine humility. "What do you want from me?" I asked finally. "Nothing," she said. "I don't want anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what Mom and Dad did. I see what I lost by never having to struggle. And I see what you built because you had no choice but to struggle. I'm not asking for help or money or anything else. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I studied her face, this stranger who was my sister. "What are you sorry for?" "For everything," she said. "For taking without thinking. For letting Mom and Dad sacrifice everything for me. For being angry at you when you were the only one who understood how things really worked. For calling you selfish when I was the selfish one all along." My hands trembled with contained rage, but it was old rage, rage that had nowhere left to go. "Do you know what the worst part was?" I asked her. "It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the favoritism. It was being invisible. Watching them light up when you entered a room and barely notice when I did. Feeling like I had to earn love that you got for free." She was crying now, tears running down her face. "I know. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. And I'm so sorry. You deserved better. You deserved parents who saw you and valued you and invested in you. And instead, you got parents who used you as a piggy bank for me." "They didn't use me," I corrected. "They ignored me, When I finally succeeded, they showed up expecting me to fix their mistakes. That's not the same as valuing me. That's just recognizing I had something they needed. You're right, she said, wiping her eyes. And that's why I'm not asking you for anything. I'm just here to acknowledge what happened and to tell you that I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to become someone who deserves respect instead of someone who expects it for free. Leave me in the comments. Have you been through something similar? We talked for 2 more hours. She told me about her struggles with work, with learning to live on a retail salary, with facing the reality of her choices. I told her about my business, about the mentorship programs I'd started, about the life I'd built. For the first time in our lives, we talked as equals, not as the favored daughter and the forgotten one. Just as 2 women who'd been shaped by the same parents in profoundly different ways. When we parted, she hugged me. It was awkward and brief, but it felt real. I don't know if we can ever have a real sister relationship, she said, but I'd like to try. If you're willing, I'm willing to try, I said carefully, but it has to be built on honesty. No pretending the past didn't happen. No glossing over the damage. Just honest conversation about who we are and how we got here. I can do that, she said. I have to do that because pretending and hiding from reality is what got me here. I watched her walk to her old car, the same car our parents had bought her years ago, now barely running, and I felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness, exactly, not even sisterly love, but hope. Hope that maybe, someday, we could build something real from the wreckage of our family. Driving home that day, I thought about transformation, about how crisis reveals character and sometimes, rarely changes it. My parents' financial collapse had forced them to see reality clearly for the first time. My sister's loss of her cushy lifestyle had finally taught her the value of work and struggle. And me? I'd learned that holding boundaries wasn't cruel. It was necessary. Because here's what I know now, you can't save people from the consequences of their own choices. You can't protect them from reality forever. And when you try, you don't help them, you harm them. My parents harmed my sister by sheltering her from struggle. They harmed me by withholding support I deserved. And when I refused to repeat their pattern of enabling, I wasn't being cruel. I was being honest. The truth is, I could have written that check. I could have solved all their problems with money I'd never miss. But what would that have taught them? That actions don't have consequences. That you can make terrible choices for decades and someone will always bail you out? That would have been the real cruelty, robbing them of the chance to grow and learn and become better people. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories like this. Now, 2 years after they showed up at my door, my parents have stabilized. They're not wealthy. They'll never retire comfortably, but they're managing. They've learned to live within their means, to budget carefully, to find joy in simple things. And most importantly, they've learned that their daughters are separate people with separate lives, not extensions of their own dreams and disappointments. My sister is slowly building a life too. She got promoted to shift supervisor at her retail job. It's not glamorous, but she talks about it with pride. Real pride, earned through actual work, not the hollow pride of accomplishments funded by someone else's money. She's dating someone she met at work, a normal job who doesn't care about her, Instagram aesthetic, or her London adventures. She seems, for the first time in her life, content. And me? I'm still building, still growing my business, still mentoring young people, still creating the opportunities I never had. But I'm also learning something new, how to let people in, how to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than fear of abandonment, how to accept that not everyone who approaches me wants something from me. It's hard. Decades of being overlooked taught me to be self-sufficient to a fault. I've had to learn that asking for help isn't weakness, that accepting support doesn't make me dependent, that letting someone love me doesn't mean they'll stop seeing me. These are lessons my sister never had to learn because she had too much support, and lessons I had to relearn because I had too little. Last week, I had dinner with both of my parents and my sister, all of us together for the first time in years. It was awkward and careful, full of long pauses and careful topic selection, but it was also real. We didn't pretend everything was fine. We didn't gloss over the past. We just sat together as four people who'd been broken by the same family dynamics and were trying, slowly, to build something new. My mother made a simple meal in their small apartment kitchen. My father told stories about his hardware store customers. My sister talked about training a new employee at work. And I shared news about a scholarship program I just launched for first-generation college students who couldn't afford graduate school. "That's wonderful," my mother said, and I could hear the subtext, "I'm sorry we couldn't do that for you." "It is," I agreed. "I'm funding it myself. It feels good to give other people the opportunities I didn't have. Was I wrong to feel this way?" There was a moment of heavy silence. Then my father spoke. "You've become someone remarkable. Not because of us, despite us." "Yes," I said simply, because there was no point in sugarcoating it. "Despite you." "We know," my mother said quietly, "and we're trying to do better, not just for you, for ourselves. We're trying to become people we can be proud of." "Then keep trying," I said. "That's all any of us can do. Keep trying to be better than we were yesterday." As I drove home that night, I thought about forgiveness. People talk about it like it's a switch you flip, like one day you're angry and the next day you're not. But it's not like that. Forgiveness is a process, a slow thawing of frozen anger, a gradual letting go of the need for things to have been different. I'm not there yet. Maybe I'll never be fully there, but I'm further along than I was. I can sit in a room with my family without feeling my blood boiling with indignation. I can hear my mother's apologies without immediately dismissing them. I can watch my sisters struggle with entry-level work and feel compassion instead of satisfaction. That's growth. Not forgiveness necessarily, but growth. And maybe that's enough, because here's the truth I've learned. You don't have to forgive people to move forward. You don't have to forget what they did or pretend it didn't hurt. You just have to decide that carrying anger is heavier than putting it down. You have to choose your own peace over their punishment. And you have to build a life so full and meaningful that their failures become just one chapter in your story, not the entire book. My parents failed me, that's a fact. They chose my sister over me repeatedly, explicitly, and with full awareness of what they were doing. They told me I deserved nothing, and they meant it. Those are facts I'll carry forever. But here are other facts. I succeeded anyway. I built a life they never invested in. I became someone they never expected. And when they came to me desperate and broken, I held my boundaries and taught them the lessons they'd taught me. I didn't save them, but I didn't destroy them either. I just let them experience the natural consequences of their choices. And in doing that, I finally freed myself. Not from the past, you can't escape the past, but from the need for it to have been different. I stopped waiting for them to see me, to value me, to finally recognize what they'd lost. Because I saw myself, I valued myself, and I recognized what I'd built from nothing. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and comment what you would do in this situation. That's the real triumph, not the money or the success or the satisfaction of watching them struggle. The real triumph is becoming someone who doesn't need their validation, someone who built her own worth independent of their judgment, someone who proved that being told you deserve nothing doesn't mean you are nothing. I think about that 23-year-old girl sometimes, sitting at her parents' table with her dreams crumbling in her hands. I think about how she felt in that moment, worthless, invisible, fundamentally unlovable. And I wish I could reach back through time and tell her the truth. You are not what they see. You are what you build. You are not what they invest in. You are what you invest in yourself. You are not the daughter who deserves nothing. You are the woman who will create everything. But she had to learn that on her own, just like I did. Just like everyone does who's been underestimated and overlooked and told they don't measure up. You learn it in the lonely hours of working 2 jobs. You learn it in the small victories no one celebrates. You learn it in the moments when you realize you've been carrying yourself all along and you're stronger than you ever imagined. So, to anyone reading this who's been told they're not enough, who's been overlooked or underestimated or explicitly told they don't deserve support, believe them. Not because they're right, but because they're showing you who they are. And then use that knowledge as fuel. Build something they never expected. Become someone they never imagined. Not to prove them wrong. They'll never admit they were wrong, but to prove to yourself that their judgment was never the measure of your worth. And when they come back, desperate and needy, and suddenly seeing your value, you get to choose. You can forgive them or not. You can help them or not. You can let them into your life or not. But make those choices from a place of power, not pain. Choose what serves your peace, not their comfort. Choose what honors the person you became, not the person they tried to make you. Because that's the real lesson here. Not that parents can fail their children. Everyone knows that. Not that money corrupts or favoritism damages. Those are obvious truths. The real lesson is that you can be told you're worthless and still build worth. You can be told you deserve nothing and still deserve everything. You can be invisible to the people who should see you most clearly and still be visible to yourself. And that visibility, that clear, honest seeing of who you really are, that's worth more than any inheritance or investment or parental approval could ever be. So, I'm grateful. Not for what they did, but for who I became. Not for their neglect, but for the strength I built from it. Not for their failures, but for the success I created despite them. I'm grateful that I learned early that I could only rely on myself, because that taught me I was reliable. I'm grateful that they never invested in me, because I learned to invest in myself. I'm grateful that they told me I deserved nothing, because it forced me to define my own worth. And most of all, I'm grateful that when they finally came asking for my help, I was strong enough to say no, because that no wasn't cruel. It was honest. It was boundaried. It was the culmination of decades of learning that I didn't owe anyone access to what I'd built alone. Comment if you know someone like this. Now, I wake up in my beautiful home that I bought with money I earned. I go to work at a company I helped build. I mentor young people who remind me of who I used to be. I have careful, boundaried relationships with family members who finally see me, and I have peace. Not perfect peace, not uncomplicated peace, but the peace that comes from knowing I made choices I can live with. The peace that comes from looking in the mirror and recognizing the person looking back. The peace that comes from building a life on my own terms, with my own values, according to my own definition of success. That's what they couldn't take from me, even when they told me I deserved nothing. They couldn't take my ability to define my own worth. They couldn't take my capacity to build my own life. They couldn't take my power to choose who I became. And in the end, that's the only power that matters. Not the power to control others or force their approval or make them see what they missed. The power to become who you are, despite what anyone else thinks or says or does. That's the power I found. That's the power I keep. And that's the power I try to give to others who've been told they're not enough. Because we are enough. We always were. We just had to learn it for ourselves.